Pharisees, they used to annoy each other, the two of them. They were always on the nerves of each other. You look at Jesus and Pharisees and look at the sort of words he will use for them. No apology at all. When they also get it, they also give it to him. This time they were so annoyed. What do you mean? 48 years, 46 years, say 3 days. But the Bible says that when he died and he rose up after the 3 days, John said they now understood that when he was talking about destroy this temple, the temple that was receiving the offerings, the high priest, and all that, which he had prescribed himself in the OT, that should be the place of worship. He said, destroy it, and I'll put it back. 3 days. And they said they knew that he was talking about the body. 3 days. They knew that he was talking about his body. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 1 and 2. The point of what we are saying is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, verse 2, and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle, set up by the Lord, not by man. Now listen, he's saying that when Jesus rose, he appeared before God in heaven, in front of his throne. And they are saying now that Hebrews is saying that that is the true sanctuary, the true temple, right in front of God himself. So in the New Testament, it is the temple without walls, right in the throne room of God. That is where the temple is. So when he died and they went to the temple, they found out that the temple was rent from top to down. It is as if God himself. If it was from down up, we could have said that maybe John or Peter in his anger has tore the thing. But from top down. So now he has ripped the partition that separated us from God. And now our worship is right in front of God, the throne of God. He has dealt with the temple in his body. Look at chapter 9, verse 11. Chapter 9 of Hebrews, verse 11. When Christ came as high priest of the good things that are already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle. What? A greater and more perfect house of meeting, tabernacle. That is not man-made. This is to say, not a part of this creation. Now listen. What we call temple in our generation, in the New Testament, is not part of creation. Some of you think that God is here. There was this woman who was going to church. The husband was so anointed that morning. But she knew she was going to lead worship. So as the husband was insulting her and saying all sorts of things, she was just singing a song. Otufu nenimo kenhubi odom ne pashe ne ma. Sorry, I'm also sorry. And then the woman will say, and the woman did not say a word to the husband because she was going to meet God. She was going to take the worship. So when she went, very good singer, devoted, and then she did a very wonderful worship. But when church was over, so, what were you saying in the morning? Because she wouldn't defile herself that morning, because she was going to meet God in Pentecost Chapel. If you like, after we have closed, open, let these doors be ajar. And then let goats decide to come around. And some of the goats too in our generation, they like good things. You'll be surprised that these goats will make their way here and then they'll be jumping and then sullying the place out. If God were here, he would have come to meet the goats dead. God is not here. In fact, according to Acts chapter 17, verse 25, let's read Acts 17, 25. And he is not saved by human hands, as if he needed anything, but he himself give all men life and breath and everything. Let's take 24. I think it's 24 that I wanted. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands. So that any structure that is built by human hands, he does not live in them. So that the Bible says Jesus went straight to the throne room of God. That is the new temple now. So when we are worshiping, you should have it in mind that you are right before God. So Jesus dealt with the temple in his body. The second one is what? The sacrifice. Hebrews chapter 10, 1 to 10. Hebrews 10, 1 to 10. The law is only a shadow of good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. The law was not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifice repeat endlessly, year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once for all, and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins, because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire. But what? But a body you prepared for me. Hold it. Let's go back to 5. Let's read together. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. So God prepared what for Jesus? Body. Now you know God is spirit, and Christ being God is spirit. God planted this seed in the womb of a woman, so that the woman would give Christ's body. So it's just because of body. That is why we put seed in a woman, so that the woman will give the seed body. Why did he need a body? Verse 6. With burnt offerings and sin offerings, you were not pleased. 7. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, O God. 8. First he said, sacrifice and offering, burnt offerings and sin offering you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them, although the law required them to be made. That is past tense. Then he said, here I am. I have come to do your will. What is there? He set aside the first to establish the second. What was the first? The first is the sacrifices of goats and animals. Now Christ has now come to set aside the first, and now he has introduced the second. verse 10. And by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Now listen. He says that in the Old Testament, the high priest will always have to carry blood. And if the blood of animals was enough to cleanse the people from their sins, why then should he have been doing that repeatedly? Then he says God had a secret in Christ. He was going to cause him to sacrifice his body once for all. And then he would set aside the old and introduce the new order. He needed a body so he could shed blood. Christ needed a body so he could shed blood. Because without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. So if Jesus was just a spirit don't bear blood. So he needed a woman's womb so he could get a body so that the blood could be shed once and for all. So he has become our ultimate sacrifice. So we don't need like the sacrifices of the Old Testament any longer. What is the third point? The high priest. That is what we are concerned so much about so far this presentation is concerned. Are we together? I'm not used to shouting and making too much noise, but I'm preaching. You should have the confidence to speak slowly if you are that type of a person. But I enjoy people who shout a lot. I don't know why. Maybe because I don't know how to do it. The high priest, how did he fulfill that? Hebrews chapter 7, from verse 18 through to 24. The former regulation is set aside. The former regulation that needed a high priest is set aside because it was weak and useless. Did you read that? It was weak and useless. For the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced, by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath. Now listen, let me just explain that. He says that all the high priests, none of them was put in place with an oath. With an oath means in tongue. But this high priest we call Jesus, he was made a high priest with an oath that God said, today have I begotten you. You will be a high priest after the order of Melchizedek forever. Then he said that because God has sworn to make him the high priest forever, and in the Old Testament, the high priest needed to die before another high priest is introduced. But this one, when is he going to die? So if you are waiting to become a high priest, I beg you, forget. When is he going to die? And he has been made a high priest on oath. God himself has sworn. So nothing changes that. Christ replaces the Old Testament high priest. When you read on, you will see. What I'm interested in is that he has changed the order. So Jesus now becomes the temple. He becomes the sacrifice. Then he becomes the priest, the high priest. 1 John chapter 4 verse 17. I love this text for many reasons, and one of which is what I'm going to say. Give me King James. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Shall we read together? Because As he is, so are we in this world. Shall we read that one again? Because as he is, so are we in this world. As who is? As who is? So we have just established that Christ is the temple. He is the sacrifice. He is the high priest. So are we. So we are the temple, we are the sacrifice, and we are the high priest. Where? In this world. I'm happy that he says in this world. You see, when we go to where Christ is, we cannot be casting demons like we have the opportunity to cast. When we get to where he is, you need to put your crown down. Because you would have met the king already. But once he is not here on earth, we are representing him. That is why the Bible says, as he is, so are we. In this world, not in heaven. Now, 1 Corinthians 3:16 says that, don't you know that your body is the temple of God? So he is the temple and we are also the temple of God. And that the Spirit of God dwells in you. Number 2, he is the sacrifice and we are the sacrifice. Romans chapter 12. So this time in worship, we don't need goats, we don't need animals, we don't need money. Romans 12. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present what? Your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable act of worship. So you present what? Your body as a living sacrifice. Because his body was a sacrifice, so are our bodies. As he is, so are we in this world. So when we are talking about the worship, it's not about money. It's about you. If you give yourself first to God, then your money also is baptized. People have money because they have not given themselves to God. When we talk about offering, they lose beats, heartbeats. They can't give their money because it's not about money, it's about you yourself, your body. The high priest. 1 Peter 2, verse 9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal, yeah. So we are priesthood. We are royal priesthood. 1 Peter 2:5 summarizes all that I've said in worship. 1 Peter 2 verse 5 from the NIV. You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. So now we are the temple, the spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Now that is a summary of all that I've said. You also, Jesus destroyed the temple. His body was the temple, and now we are the spiritual house. We needed a sacrifice in the Old Testament. Now we don't need that sacrifice. Your body is the spiritual sacrifice. We needed the priest. We don't need any priest. You yourself, you are the priest. So let me ask you this question. Where should we go for worship? Huh? So, who is the temple? Myself. Who is the sacrifice? Myself. Who is the priest? Myself. So, who sacrifices your worship? Yourself. When? Anytime. Where? Anywhere. Anytime, any place, anywhere. So, you cannot say, as here the SU president is not here. No. If I go to the temple, no. Wherever you are. That is why Jesus said, a time is coming that the true worshippers will worship God in spirit and in truth, because God is spirit. He is everywhere. I want you to hold this closely. Now, if we have replaced the high priest, then let's get a picture of the high priest again, please. What that means is this. It is a spiritual armor that was in the Old Testament representing the turban, the abutre. What it meant was that God was going to save us. Then when I'm dressing, I must remember that I am saved. So in the midst of unbelievers, when they are speaking profane, don't forget that you are not part of them. You are saved. Don't forget. So every day, cover your mind with the notion that I am saved. So that when arrows of evil, sin, are coming in, your turban will not allow it. When somebody texts a message to you, say hi, then you have already seen the gestures of that lady already. And she says hi. Don't say hello. Remember that you don't belong to that kind of game, because you're saved. Then, now, spiritually, you now have to tie the diadem to the turban. So, I am saved is not enough. I am saved to be holy unto the Lord. Please, I didn't come to tell you stop fornicating. You can continue if you desire. I didn't come to tell you to watch the way you dress. If that is your style, you can continue, it doesn't matter. But those of us who are born again, we are saved, and our goal is to be holy unto the Lord. Our goal is to be holy unto the Lord. So you find out that in the New Testament, it is the same as the Old. The Old was symbols and regulations. But the real one has come, which is spiritual. As I stand here, I am the high priest. I don't know whether you are the low priest, but me, I am high priest. According to the Bible. Whether you are a woman or a man, you are a high priest. And you must deliberately, daily put on the helmet of salvation. Don't forget it at all. All of us like money. Sometimes, when certain monies are coming to you, we question it because we are saved. Otherwise, corruption is culture in Africa. Corruption, it is culture in Africa. But because we are saved, we don't take monies that don't belong to us. And you must deliberately fix on your mind, on your forehead, holiness unto the Lord. That is your goal. That is what you want to achieve. That is why 1 Thessalonians 4:7 says that we have been called unto holiness. We have been called unto holiness. That is the belief. Are we together? Are you here? Are you getting something? I hope you do. What then is holiness? Holiness expresses God's essential nature and divine perfection. Holiness belongs to God only. Belongs to God alone. That's why we are talking about God's nature and his perfection. Hannah said, there is none holy as the Lord. Miriam said that glorious in holiness, is fearful in praise, he does wonders. Holiness is God's nature. And if we are children of God, should we be different from that? Have you seen Okoto who was animal before? It says you have to be careful. Number 2, holiness can be described as a state of being separated to God for his service and a pursuit of living according to the image of God. Holiness can be described as a state of being separated to God for his service and a pursuit of living according to the image of God. Now, I'm careful not to define holiness. I don't do that. I try not to, unless it is an examination. Otherwise, I won't do it. Anything that is a reserve of God is difficult to define. You cannot digest God and know who he is in totality. So I'm trying to describe it. Number 3, in the New Testament, the only thing that is holy in the New Testament is the believer. What does that mean? So the believer, so far as holiness is concerned, in the believer, holiness is a pursuit